Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
That's Ron Crabtree here, back with another episode of MetaPod. And as you're probably well aware, we focus on the three big common challenges that organizations face. The forever labor shortage, digitization, digital transformation, and just flat needing to do more with less. And that's a huge challenge for organizations of all kinds. And we've had a number of discussions, in some of the episodes of MetaPod around AI and digital transformation. It remains a really high interest topic. I think our guest here, Richard Ricks with Silvertree, had some pretty interesting research cited that they were, surveying an audience and had some research behind them and finding that 88% of organizations would say maybe they don't have a good AI strategy or a real plan. And that number one blockage was culture, at least in the opinion of a group of executives weighing in on that topic. So this is a really fascinating topic. And Richard's going to be talking to us a little bit about, when we think about AI and just digital transformation in general, because it isn't just AI. There's a bunch of interrelated technologies in play here, things that feed AI, the data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he'll give us some insights to that. Then the real challenges we have to get through and major roadblocks to dealing with those three common challenges, because at the end of the day, everything we do affects everything else. And I have this argument that if we aren't really rigorously pursuing digital transformation, digitization of work, leveraging tools like AI, we're underserving ourselves if we are concerned about, getting more done with a smaller and smaller workforce. If we're concerned about being able to operate with less resources, waste, and effort to get things done, and dealing with the fact that if we don't do it, our competitors will. And that's a massive challenge. So Richard's going to give us some insight to that. And with no further ado, Richard, tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Ron. Hi, I'm Richard Ricks, the founder and CEO of Silvertree Consulting and Services. I'm fresh off of an event called CEO Connections Conference, where about 150 mid-market CEOs participated, and I had the pleasure of facilitating a AI breakout session. So the discussion we're going to have today is built upon the outcome of that discussion, plus the research that we shared with those CEOs. And we're going to keep it at a high level. We're not going to dive into the technology. That's a topic for another session if you're interested, but we're going to keep it high level. So first off, when we talk to people about artificial intelligence, many think it's a single technology. Well, as you probably know, those that have participated and tried different AI-based capabilities, it's multiple technologies brought together to provide a solution. You probably heard about machine learning. You probably heard about natural language processing. You probably heard about large language models. All of that are things that enable AI to work and are components of an AI solution. But the best way to understand AI is to consume it. And I would assume that just about every one of you that's watching this MetaPod has in some way used AI and you didn't even know it. If you're using your iPhone or your Android-based device, you're using AI, right? There's applications out there for as basic as note-taking, which will change the way meetings are managed. So AI is not a technology that is just bolted on to an existing process. It's a transformational process enhancer. And it will drive either disruption of your business or it will drive greater competitiveness of your business going forward. Going back to Ron's point, most clients that I've talked to look at AI to do one of three things: to give them more efficiency and more effectivity in how they serve their clients, so customer service, to get them access to different revenue streams by offering different services, and also to enable them to be more cost effective in how they execute the business transactions within their business. So as Ron says, in this world where the technical talent or even the operational talent are difficult to come by, AI provides a part of the answer to allow organizations to transform their business.
You make some really good points there. And I'm going to ask you in a moment to jump into the diagnostics, right? You kind of touched on those at a high level. And what you're saying resonates with me a lot. And I've had a lot of really interesting guests on this podcast series so far. We have lots more coming up next year. Now, a couple of things you said are very important. I like to describe, digital transformation as death by a thousand cuts. There's no silver bullet cure. There's all kinds of pieces. It's continually changing. If you can't implement an element in 90 days or less, you're probably failing because everything changes in 90 days. And I heard a really interesting quote. I think it was on the OpEx group post I saw. There's our global OpEx group on LinkedIn. My buddy Joe Paris runs that. And somebody basically said, AI is really not going to change the world, but you have to think about it this way. Workers with AI will outperform workers without AI. So, it really ties in with what you're saying here. So if you don't mind, why don't you go ahead and dive into kind of like three key areas and explain this so that folks aren't familiar with some of these challenges or the jargon, that we could arm them with the kind of questions they should be asking to evaluate and determine if these three areas you're talking about are a real opportunity or a threat if we don't do something about it to our organization. So I'll turn it back to you.
Very good, Ron. First, I would say those that may be considering an AI journey need to experience AI and really gain an appreciation for the power of the technology. What we found through the dialogue at the CEO Connections is they've heard the buzzwords, the CEOs, but they really don't understand the technology and the capability. So, what I recommended and what we collectively recommended, and an outcome of the CEO dialogue, and we're talking about close to 50 CEOs participating in this breakout session, was we have taken the mission to identify a number of use cases that are ubiquitous, regardless of the vertical you're in, such as the note taking app, such as chatbot for customer service or IT. We recommend that the CEOs take the time to understand how those basic capabilities of AI both operate as well as can transform their operations in a small way and what's involved. For example, note taking is more than a note taking application that through natural language processing can take the notes from a meeting and correlate those and help you be more effective in how you manage meetings versus having somebody record or write down the notes and the action items. It actually changes the way the meeting is conducted. And so it's not just about a note-taking based AI app. It actually helps manage the meeting more effectively to deliver an outcome that can be create reusable content for future action tracking and so forth. So what we encourage clients to do is to experience AI, to purposely experience AI with ubiquitous applications and understand even the basic utilizations of AI, how they change and what is involved in taking full advantage of it. Why?
I'd like to interrupt if I could with an example that I've recently experienced. I'm going to admit to being a bit of what's the word for not a neophyte, but there's a word for somebody who's very resistant to technology, right? I can't remember
You're a late adopter.
a Luddite, right?
Right.
Bit of a Luddite, right? A little bit slow to, AI changing the world. But I hosted the annual IXPA event. It's a consortium of similar companies to mine. We get together once a year. We've met in Orlando, and we were attempting to have people from around the world join us via Zoom. So we had a speakerphone in the room. It was pretty clunky. It wasn't an ideal setup at the hotel, but we attempted to record everything in Zoom. And at the end of that, we had, oh geez, more than 10 hours of these voice recordings with people around the table, people coming in online, talking. And my team, I didn't do it myself, but my team basically took that, ran it through transcriptions, ran it through an AI engine and pushed it back to me. And I was flabbergasted with just a 2.5 page summary, how accurately that captured the gist of what we talked about, the action items that were taken, what was important, what was the real meat of that. It only took me maybe 15 minutes to go through that and insert a few things that it missed because the recording wasn't working or there was too much noise or whatever, and insert a couple of links to go find the source documents we were looking at while we were talking, in a Google Doc and something like that. And I was just flat amazed. So I'm told, I agree. And I would advise that we are looking for opportunities to put people together with AI to make them more effective. And we're already missing the boat. So I'll turn it
That's
back
right.
to you.
Yeah, I was telling you before we started the podcast that my president has really embraced the generative AI and ChatGPT. So before he asks any of our technical resources, and we have an abundant resource of technical leaders, a question, He'll go to ChatGPT and he'll ask ChatGPT about it, and he'll get what ChatGPT specifies as the best practices and capability. And then he'll look for validation from our team. And even for proposals and things of that sort, we are using ChatGPT in a big way because why do we want to recreate that capability when we can take advantage of it? So the productivity in the proposal process and even how we respond to questions our clients may have is enhanced by generative AI and ChatGPT, which is, everybody's hearing about it. And when people think about AI, they think about AI through the generative AI and ChatGPT type application. But as you and I know, like we just talked, is much greater than that, right? So let's move on, Ron, to some of the diagnostic challenges that we've seen. Many of our clients and many of the CEOs think that they can just bolt on AI to a process and get the benefits of it. Well, we have seen that to be an abject failure. Yes, you can enhance your processes, but you can't take full advantage and get the benefits of what you have to do to take advantage of it if you don't step forward to understand how your processes are going to need to be adjusted to accommodate artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is just like any technology that has emerged that uses term digital transformation, where it's a form of digital transformation because it's a digital technology that is used to transform business. And it needs to be considered that way. It is not just a plug it in and hope that it works. It requires a tremendous amount of proactive engagement to understand how it will change your processes, how it will change how you manage data, because as we all know in this IT world that we live in, data is the digital fuel. And we're finding that whether you do AI or not, that the work that you go in to get your data in order to and preparation for AI can deliver significant value in the form of business intelligence and predictive analytics, even before you take the step to automate processes or drive transactional enhancements using artificial intelligence. Ron, you were raising your hand a little bit, and I just kept going. So,
That's
um,
all right. That's all right. I was wondering if you could share a story, an example, maybe, something you guys looked at recently. Now, you don't have to disclose any confidential information, but just give a very specific, pithy example of what you uncovered when you had that process evaluation versus bolting it on, but actually integrating it, making part of a new and different process. Can you give a specific example? We're trying to arm our listeners with what are they looking for with a little more specificity. Let's peel the onion back just a bit more. What data, information, evidence might I be looking for?
yeah, so I'll start with a business process that I feel I have deep expertise in, and that is IT and IT operations. So IT is great at providing service and being responsive to opportunities, but not as good at being proactive and preventing and taking advantage even of the data within their domain to drive automation. It tends to be automated in a, you might say, a tower-based domain versus looking at the holistic solution. So what we found when we started our AI journey, even at Silvertree, because we built this vigilance platform, which is an AI-based platform, is that our team members, the first inclination was to augment their work with artificial intelligence. To augment. Yes, to take advantage of AI to reduce the transactional work and increase the productivity. But what we found was that as we became better at managing our data and understanding what our data is telling us, that the opportunity was for a total process reengineering in how we serve our customers. What we had to do was train our people. Now, these are IT people, right? These are techies, right? On how they are to take advantage, and we had to modify our process operations. So, what has that resulted in? Because we did the analysis when we started this AI journey, and we came up with that 70%. That's a big number. 70% of all operational transactions could be automated using some form of digital technology. Why being a key component. And so we're on that journey. But if you think about the cultural challenge we had in getting people to basically take advantage of that capability because they're concerned about being displaced, right? If you think about the challenge we had when taking an organization that had historically managed data in silos and really didn't manage the data other than kind of on a transactional basis to solve the problem immediately and maybe do some Pareto analysis of the problems, but really use scripting and other technologies for automation. But what we have found is that by managing the data, by changing the process, we can totally eliminate things like call routing. Where we used to have an agent take a call and route it to a tier 2, tier 3 person. No longer do we need to do that. So what does that do to the client? Well, we've eliminated the need for that agent other than when there's a need for an agent assist involvement, because some clients want to speak to a person, and that's fine. So we always have to have that capability. But in most cases, if we are able to prompt the client through a chatbot, they can either resolve the problem or they can get routed immediately to the tier 2 or tier 3 resource to solve their problem. What does that do? Well, first, it's reduced the cost from an IT cost perspective. Secondly, it's increased the productivity of the end user because instead of him or her talking to an agent, then getting routed to a tier 2, tier 3 person to solve their problem, and that delay and that cycle time, plus the cost associated with, we completely eliminated that. So we reduced the cost, provided better service and more responsiveness and productivity to the end user. Everybody wins, but it takes a process reengineering. It also takes communicating with the end users and the customers of our platform that, hey, the way you are provided service is different than the way we've historically provided, which was agent-based, right? Back to you. Back to you.
Let me ask a question. One of the things that I've posited, to our listeners is, this notion of some form of value stream mapping. And would you advocate that if I'm the executive on the board of directors, I'm just walking down the hall and looking for evidence that we're really doing a good job of thinking about this, we're going to be looking for things that look like current state, future state value stream maps. I mean,
That's right.
what kind of evidence are we looking for that would say to us, yes, we're looking at the right things and we're taking the correct approach?
Well, I think single transactional processes and capability obviously is not a value stream you want to focus on. So where you need to focus on to take advantage of, or any potential client to take advantage of artificial intelligence is first, can the execution logic be data driven? All right. Second, is the level of transactional volume worth the investment to go through the implementation and the transition?
What's the business?
And what's the business case to enable that? And third, what is, as you said, the value stream broader than just the business case, because it could be strategic value. Because in many cases, the business case could be driven by, better service, lower cost, more growth. But it also could be, if we don't do it strategically, we're going to be disrupted from a market perspective, which is more catastrophic than, the incrementalism that people may look at. And let me tell you, the newbies coming into the marketplace, they have no technical debt, they have no cultural debt, they have no data debt. So their ability to move quickly into market segments, because they have none of those three top debt elements that prevent transformational change of businesses, they don't have that baggage that they have to carry forward. They're free to move agilely and reinvent. So I think the key thing is, I think value stream analysis is fundamental, and look for high volume transactions that can be data driven, that has a consistent set of outcomes that can be through data and algorithmic logic predicted to a reasonable degree. Now that's a lot of words, but that's the type of stuff we do with clients. We usually find clients, are at a point where, hey, this AI stuff or even this digital transformation stuff, come and help me understand how I take advantage of it. And by the nature of what we do as a consulting company, we do value stream analysis because we have to do that to determine what's the highest impact opportunities for our clients to derive benefit. And so I like that you raised that, Ron. It's absolutely in line with what a good consulting company and partner of a client would do to enable a client to understand where they could get the highest benefit from whatever investment they're prepared to make.
And so it sounds like you'd agree with an argument that I've made for a long time that you could try to use digital transformation and AI to fix everything. Well, maybe you die of old age before you do all that. So the trick is, what are the right things to focus on? Build a community of practice, work through the change management issues, prove that it actually works and then replicate that and then begin to scale that out. Would you advocate for that versus trying to fix everything at once?
No, I think, Ron, as a guy who's been in this business for about as long as you have, I'm sure it's similar experience levels. No, I would not advocate that. I would advocate, as you suggest, first, I would advocate pick a process in an area that you can have a win with. Because if you're trying to change the culture of the organization, then nothing like success changes the culture because success breeds success. Many times, organizations start with very complex challenges that they're trying to address. And that is probably where great value would be realized. Obviously, that's why they're trying to address it. The challenge with that is the cycle time to get to the benefit is greater, and the probability for failure and the change event is greater, right? And the experience of the team and the company that's maybe going through this may or may not have, they're a single company versus a company like mine that deals with this every day, right? So they don't have the experience of the change event and what's involved in the successful change event, transformational event. So I would say pick a high impact, but something that you have confidence in that you can be successful with. Now, I think where we see tremendous benefit is in transactional processes that are somewhat behind the scenes of clients. And the power of that is the customers in clients. The power of that is the risk of failure is very low, but the learning is tremendous. And the value is usually clear because it's either associated with productivity, cost reduction, or better managing assets, if you will, whether they're bills of material or, assets in a warehouse, right? So all of that can be beneficial to the company in a big way. And then move to the edge because once you get the experience and your team has seen success, and you understand what the recipe is, and companies like ours can help you with that. And that will breed further success and further motivation for your business owners, leaders, and team members to really want to embrace the change event. That's my view, right? I've seen companies try to take on the biggest challenge with a technology transformation, and they're not ready for it. And this disruptive technologies, you really need to kind of walk before you run. And that's why I say, earlier I said, take some use cases that are ubiquitous across pretty much every enterprise out there, small, medium, or large, and learn from them. Learn how to implement them successfully. They're not going to change your business dramatically, but they may improve your productivity. But you're going to gain a tremendous amount of learning that you can apply to more strategic transformational events that you want to pursue, right?
This is awesome. So you mentioned earlier, some statistics around 88% of organizations either don't have an AI strategy or a plan. I'm going to guess our audience is probably not too far off from that. What would you say, or, if you're going to give advice at this point, or these folks are like, I wasn't even sure where to start. For those of us who haven't even started out there, can you bump that up a little bit? Say, here's what you should really look at first, right? The diagnostic part, and then follow right behind that, if you would, and then go do these things. You've already told us most of the go dos
Right.
along the way, so you don't have to repeat all of that. But maybe you could kind of tiny step back and say, if you really come into this cold, right? What should you really start with the diagnostic, picking what to work on, and then pivot from that to here's the practical approach.
So you went there earlier, Ron, when you talked about value stream mapping,
Right.
right? You have to start there. So you have to decide, let's say you've already done your experimental work on taking advantage of ubiquitous AI based applications, and now you're ready to move further into true business transformation and how to take advantage of AI from a business transformation perspective. Because you have a little bit of background, you have a little bit of understanding, and you believe your organization is ready for it. I would say the challenge is the last piece, believing your organization is ready for it versus the organization being ready for it. And I'll come to that in a second, right? So my perspective is most clients do not have the expertise in their organization to understand how to properly do the value stream mapping and how to take advantage of digital technologies, especially in the mid-market where I serve. because they're resource constrained, financially constrained. They don't have the talent. So pick a partner, a consulting partner that can help you do that analysis, that can also help you assess what is happening in your industry and understand how AI or even other digital technologies are being used to enable transformation of companies within your industry. And a little bit of so a little bit of benchmarking, and companies like ours can do that. We do that all the time because most clients want proof points, right? And the best proof points is a client or a company that's in a similar industry that is using a capability and getting the benefit and are willing to talk about it, right? And what we find is many clients are willing to talk about their successes and their failures with deploying technology. And part of our job as a consulting company is bring that expertise and that synthesis of insight to our clients and also make those clients available through our network. And, organizations like yours, organizations like CEO Connections facilitate that type of dialogue, which is healthy, right? So that's one. Number two is once you've done the value stream mapping, and I suggest you use a partner that understands the technology and can work with you and understands your business from a vertical perspective, I think that would be very helpful, right? And would help accelerate and will help you understand what are the do's and don'ts to enable you to be successful, and also can construct the business case, the project plan, and all the things you need to understand before you start a program. And, I think that's a worthwhile investment. I know it is. Every time we've engaged, it's been successful, and clients have really gotten tremendous value out of it. And so the second piece is everything you do with artificial intelligence, and in many respects, digital transformation, is driven by data. So if you want to take advantage of artificial intelligence or any digital technology, for the most part, it's going to be requirement that you get your data house in order. Do you have the proper data architecture? Do you have the proper data policies and ownership? Do you have the proper data MDM management? Do you have it?
Isn't that the enterprise information management strategy?
That's right. I mean,
Yeah.
and by the way, we've talked about big data and data for over a decade, and it's still a significant challenge. When you said earlier about the 88%, and we talked about the three areas that are constraining business transformation: cultural debt, technical debt, data debt. And technical debt, data debt, and cultural debt all kind of ties back to data debt. Data debt is both an asset that is underutilized and a problem. And so most clients have not invested adequately in putting in place the data management infrastructure to take advantage of digital technologies because they don't understand how to do that. There again, a good partner can help you do that. We just completed an engagement with a $2 billion nonprofit, and they don't have a lot of money, right? We started with engaging with every leader from the CEO down to understand what they wanted out of their business intelligence. Now that they're driven by donations and various other things, and they were having real difficulty understanding their data and the asset they had. And so we launched about 2 years ago a data transformational program. I can tell you right now, that CIO would say it was the best investment he's made. And is at a point that he's saying, I'm willing to be a case study because what you've done has been transformational of our business. Now, that's even before he's taken advantage of artificial intelligence. He's taken advantage of predictive analytics and business intelligence. And that foundation layer positions his organization, this 2 billion nonprofit, to take advantage of artificial intelligence as his next step. The third component is don't forget about the people. Cultural debt is the number one impediment to take advantage of any disruptive technological change. So IT organizations talk a lot about program management and project management. What we have now inside our company is organizational change management. What we are finding is, as part of the overall transformational roadmap and agenda, the most important, and I've always believed this, technology is not the issue with business transformation. It's how technology is adapted and change event associated with technology that's the key if you properly design a technological solution. So it's the organizational change. It's all about the people. Once you get the data and all that in order, then it's about the people. How are their jobs going to change? How are their training going to change? How are their work instructions going to change? How do you need to retrain them to take advantage of the technology? Because they will either enable the success of the transformational program or the failure.
Spot on with that.
And as a guy who's been doing transformational engagements for 25 to 30 years, I have found that the technology is not the biggest challenge if it's properly architected and properly solutioned. It's the change management of the processes and the people that utilize the technology determines the success or failure. I just had a conversation with a president, and this is kind of going back in time, Ron. So, ERP, he just implemented a major ERP, SAP. And I said, and it's not been going very well. And I said, he had a legacy SAP. I said, did you adapt to SAP or did you modify SAP to more or less look like your legacy environment? Well, the latter is what he did. And I said, well, you should expect what you got because you didn't manage the change event. You took it as a technology change event, not as a business process change event. And I'll come back to that. Any true transformational technology is all about business process and business operation change. Therefore, the people component has got to be even more important than the technological important to manage, be successful, right?
Awesome. With that, that's been fantastic. We're going to get into wrap up now. This is like fire hose of great information. I'm really glad you could join me for this. So, Richard, if people want to get in touch with you, pick your brain, ask you questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, you can call me. I don't mind a call, 843-290-9756, or my email address is richard.ricks@silvertreeservices.com. I love to interact with clients just in an advisory capacity. It costs you nothing. I mean, you can tell I love this discussion. I love this area. At my time in my career, I call it giving back, right? And whether we do business or not, I'll be happy to take a call and give you my input, my opinion, which I'm full of them, as to what you need to consider as you think about whatever change event you may be considering.
Thank you so much for joining me, Richard.
Thank you, Ron. Always a pleasure, my friend. All the best.
Sir.
Take care. Have the best, Ron. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.